Real estate agent Toni Gilliard is sharp, instinctive, and caring. She talks to me one on one about today's real estate market for this edition of Quintin's Close Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close Ups on Facebook. Toni Gilliard, welcome to the award winning Quintin's Close Ups.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know that you are obviously a licensed real estate agent here in South Carolina, and you describe yourself as smart, diligent, compassionate, professional, and knowledgeable. Who else is Toni Gilliard these days?
Well, I am a mother of two and a woman of faith. I believe strongly in doing what I love and not focusing on the money.
And what else are you focused on?
I'm focused on helping people help themselves. So within the real estate market, a lot of agents are transactional in nature. So my goal is to educate my clients on the buyer or the seller side, but educating them so that they're not dependent upon me or other agents, that they leave with a takeaway, that they're learning through the process to be able to do it themselves the next time and do it the right way.
How are you educating people about real estate in the era of COVID?
Well, with COVID, it depends. So if it's investors, I educate them on having a contingency plan where, for example, the moratorium, as many of us are aware of, what happens when your tenant is not paying. So before COVID, I was able to educate them on, having a contingency plan when you don't have a paying tenant, having attorneys on staff to deal with eviction. But with COVID, I think that was an eye-opener for a lot of investors who were buying and holding, where there was no eviction relief because of the moratorium. So educating them on refinancing, cashing out, using the equity that they have within those properties to be able to sustain themselves while legislation was being revamped.
Now, evictions, how many of those right now in the Charleston area?
Well, there's really no ways to tell exactly the firm number because the moratorium, the eviction, moratorium keeps continuing. So don't have a hard, fast number on that, as I'm not in the landlord-tenant space, just more in the buy and hold or the buy and sell space.
And how many are holding on, or how many are in that selling space in your mind?
I would say there's a good bit who are actually just selling to other investors, foreign investors who have the capital to buy and hold, who can sustain themselves. So a lot of listings I did in the midst of COVID were investors or people who wanted to get started in the investment world or on purpose or by accident, who had a primary residence and decided to hold onto those properties and rent them out. They decided to sell them with tenants in place.
And how many of those people, how many of those properties actually sold?
All of them sold. All of them sold because they had foreign investors or outside of the area investors who had the capital to kind of wait it out and not have to worry about, okay, I'm going to have to evict. They knew at some point things would shift in the market with the moratorium, that at some point they would be able to move forward those evictions and be able to get a paying tenant in those residences.
Let me back up. How many foreign investors were there?
For me, most of my clients a lot of them are foreign investors. So for those who I've engaged with, I would say about 50% of my business, or a lot of them are not U.S. citizens or new U.S. citizen foreign investors who are purchasing real estate.
And you said this on your website too, quote, Toni Gilliard embodies what a great realtor should be. She is sharp, instinctive, and caring. What else should a realtor embody these days?
I would say negotiation skills, and being one who is always learning, who is chasing the deal, not the dollar. Someone who is well connected and know where to go for resources when you don't know the answer, and being okay with answering in the in the affirmative. I just don't know, but I will find out, or let me connect you to someone who might know the answer.
What are those resources that they don't know about that they should know?
For example, like 1031 exchange, or those who are doing those kind of investments, They need to have a qualified attorney who's experienced in that platform. They need to have a CPA. Or you have the baby investors, or what I call them, who want to put everything in their personal name. So I always advise them, you need to, partner with a business attorney, not just a closing attorney, someone who's savvy to be able to educate you on what it looks like when you're buying property and putting it in an LLC. Or if you're buying property, you want to put it in a trust. So having those connections with the legal community is very helpful. And someone who practiced law for some time, having those relationships definitely help when I can refer those clients to the proper persons within that industry.
And what is your relationship with a typical business attorney and a closing attorney?
So the business attorney is different. Business attorney is one who established the, LLCs and the S corps and whatever formation works for that person. The closing attorney is just the one who does the title search, who's actually dealing with the closing of the transaction. It's pretty narrow in scope. Right. Sometimes things get a little, bigger. It is not just about ratifying a contract and going to the closing table. So if you have probate, then you need someone who's experienced with that. Sometimes probate, the property is in the LLC. And then the average closing attorney, sometimes they just don't know how to navigate through that process. You definitely need someone who has the business law experience as well.
And you said this too, quote, Toni is a licensed real estate agent in South Carolina. She specializes in luxury properties. Luxury is a mindset, as you said, after practicing law for nearly 15 years. Why is luxury a mindset?
Luxury is a mindset because it's the service. So I give luxury service at every price point. So the service doesn't change because of the dollar amount of the property. And it also depends on the location of the property, the industry. So where some markets, $1 million or up would be considered luxury. Some areas in Charleston, 500,000 is the benchmark. For example, in Berkeley County, that would deem it as a luxury property, but most people don't know that. I also find that agents, when I first got into business, I was looking for, higher end or luxury agents of color. And they just don't have them. I'm like, what? So it's a mindset, right? And I think it's also educating oneself to realize, what does luxury mean to the consumer? It's not necessarily $1 million or $2 million property. It depends on the county that property is located.
So what are the luxury properties here in this Lowcountry right now?
So Berkeley County, 500,000 is the benchmark, as that is shifting. As we know, prices are going up. Charleston County, once upon a time, last year was at 550. That has changed. As of last week, I looked up to see if things have shifted. It's closer to the mid 600 price point. Would deem it luxury based on the International Luxury Marketing Association that deals with designations for luxury market. So it depends. So Charleston County is 6 in the sixes, about 680. Berkeley County 500. Dorchester is about the 550 range. So it really depends on the county.
On the county. And speaking of the county, you said this quote, Toni is a resident of Charleston, South Carolina, with strong family roots there. How do you hope to lay down your real estate roots here?
Well, I am a Gullah girl. My family is from Charleston. We are Gullah people, Geechee people. My mom was born here. It's very helpful to have a familiar face in those areas. For example, in the Mount Pleasant area, where my family is from, it's a familiar face. A lot of people, own a lot of land, and they want to deal with someone that they are familiar with. People always will do business with people they know, like, and trust. So I think having the Charleston roots, although I'm a native New Yorker, right? Having the Charleston roots is definitely helpful for my client base.
Why do people trust you?
One, I would say, is because honest. I am sometimes maybe, very direct, but very honest, even if the client doesn't want to hear what the reality is. I think being fully transparent is very helpful. Not over promising and under delivering is very, important for me as a business practice. So I think also having the legal skill set and negotiations and knowing how to read contracts is also helpful, and why I get a lot of the referrals from those, within the community, especially when it relates to divorce sales or probate and that kind of thing. I don't give the legal advice. I stay in my lane, but it's also helpful in assisting that client base.
Toni, what is the reality of real estate these days?
Reality is, you really don't own your land. So that is the misconception. You see a lot of advertisement, a lot of social media posts, possess the land and own it. But people don't realize that things like eminent domain can shift that narrative. Um, but just educating people, about using real estate as a wealth building mechanism, and holding on to land and paying the taxes may be nice because God's not making any more. But if you're not generating income from that property, it's an asset if it's appreciating, but holding on to it and just paying the taxes, you're doing yourself, a disservice. Mm-hmm. So for me, the reality is, if it's not making money for you, then it's not an asset. So what can you do with your property to generate that cash flow, the residual income, to be able to do other things that are important to you and your legacy?
And what are those examples?
So a lot of people own land that's zoned commercial. A lot of people don't know that commercial is worth its weight in gold, that it's valued more. There are, different zoning that applies to land and what you can and can't do. So it's not just a matter of holding on to it. So if it's zoned commercial or rezoned, your taxes are going to go up. But what are you doing? You don't necessarily have to sell that property, especially with heirs property. If it's zoned commercial, you get it rezoned commercial. You can land lease that to a commercial, space, from storage facility to light industrial. Just a matter of being, educated about what you can do with your land to generate income and cash flow.
And you also said this too, quote, Toni fell in love with real estate during her tenure consulting with developers and investors looking to expand the Caribbean with the VRBO and, of course, the Airbnb. Due to years, she had served a diverse community, taking great pride in helping and serving others. Where is the diversity in real estate?
The diversity in real estate is a lot of countries, their dollar is losing value. And what they're trying to do now is invest in the United States, whether it be in places where you have college towns where they can have the rental, or you even have investors who are looking at luxury rentals. As it relates to the reverse, where people are looking to where I'm going to store my money and invest in properties. Other countries have a little more lax rules than some places in the United States. And as it relates to Charleston, I see a lot of that narrative changing and shifting with vacation rentals. Depending on what the legislators are doing, what you thought was Airbnb or VRBO eligible that's no longer the story. So I'm finding a lot of my clients are more interested in Belize or Barbados and other nations outside the U.S. that have a little more flexibility with what you do with your property.
And what are some of those properties that are actually eligible?
In Charleston, so it would have to be on the zone, in the map, within the zone. They do have that information posted online, and depending on where you fall at on the map, it is what it is. But I also caution some of my clients who are interested in buying who don't live in Charleston, to have a contingency plan, meaning just because it's allowing it today, it may not allow it tomorrow. So you have to have a contingency plan in place. What I have seen lately on the MLS is a lot of higher end properties are now on the market, which tells me it wasn't cash flowing how they anticipated, or they're liquidating the assets because of that same fear of, just because I can do it now is too much of a risk to, have things shift for me in the future.
And you said this too, quote, she is a savvy real estate professional who utilizes traditional and new age marketing with new and inventive methods to assist her customers as they buy or sell a home. What kind of outreach that is do you draw in buyers with?
So during COVID, that was a test for me. I was able to have 5 transactions in the middle of a pandemic, closed transactions, because I had transitioned my law practice to virtual, before shifting to real estate. So been practicing law, active attorney for 20 years, but for the 5 years on the back end, I did everything virtual, utilizing WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, those things. So I was able to still show properties, or deal with the investors who were absentee owners who had tenants to be able to FaceTime them or WhatsApp video conference with them to be able to buy properties as well. So utilizing new age technology such as those different apps was definitely helpful in getting out of the old school way of doing things.
And this might be a redundant question, but how do you harness other digital platforms to raise your exposure?
I utilize Facebook and Instagram. I get lots of my business from Facebook. Most people think it's Facebook advertising. I do have a chat box and that kind of thing to be able to do that, which is automated. However, but establishing a presence consistently on social media allows me not to be a silent agent, to stay top of mind, so that even if I'm not posting things that are real estate in nature, showing the authenticity of who I am as a person and that I'm a real person with real stories and making myself relatable, right? That has helped my business tremendously. People love when I post things about my kids, or they love when I'm in the kitchen cooking, different Caribbean things, and they love when I'm mixing up cocktails in the kitchen. So all of those things make me relatable and not a silent agent and top of mind.
And who is your target buyer pool?
My target niche market, so I have a price point, so it depends. So when I'm dealing with land, is those who own land who potentially want to attract developers to be able to buy their heirs property where we don't have to deal with crazy quiet title issues. Also have relocation, those who are moving to the area, especially with COVID, people looking for more space. So a lot of people from up north, a lot of transplants. And then also locals who are looking to upsize. Ironically, most people think people sell to downsize. Most of my clients that I'm selling for, they're looking to take that equity and to apply it to upsizing their lifestyle, to living, their dream home luxury market now that they have the equity to put a sizable down payment.
How do you plan to market the average home visually?
So I use Matterport for a lot of my listings. Matterport is something that allows you to digitally tour properties. You can actually walk through. That was very helpful in the height of the pandemic. So it was nice to have that ace in the hole so that you can actually walk through the property. Most people saw that with developers only with new construction. It wasn't a common thing that agents used, a tool, but during the pandemic, most agents actually incorporate that now in all of their listings with Matterport. And you also do the video tours and that kind of thing. But I think Matterport has definitely been a deal breaker for me.
And how do you know whether your marketing plan is actually working?
Conversion. Conversion. If they close it, then it's working.
Exactly.
So that's how you know it's working.
And I know price is the most important part of any marketing plan. How will you know if the price is actually right?
I run the numbers and I constantly run the numbers. So if a property is sat on the market longer than, my average days on market has been 3 days, which is a blessing.
Yes.
But I also compare to the market just as a whole. So just because I've listed it and at one point the market, days on market may be X and the price may be Y, I still try to run reports, every 2 weeks to make sure that my price point is on point. And sometimes the value goes up and sometimes it goes down, but keeping the seller informed on those listings of how the market is fluctuating if we need to make any price adjustments.
And what is your average list price to sales price ratio?
350,000 is average for the Charleston market. I have a couple that are closed in the fives. But the average price point for Berkeley County would be $350. For Charleston County, about $540.
And when you think about obviously home prices here in this Lowcountry area, Toni, will rates get below 3% within 2022?
Well, I'm not in the mortgage lending space, so I wouldn't be inclined to comment on what the mortgage rates are going to be. But talking to my preferred lenders, we see it fluctuating. I see some still in the twos. I just refinanced and got a decent rate. So it depends. I did see recently when you're co-borrowing now, they're taking the average of the credit score of both versus before you use one party. So now they're taking not just the average FICO, the median for the FICO, they're taking it for all parties that are on the contract. So that may complicate things a little bit, meaning if you are purchasing with someone who doesn't have great credit, is literally you got to be equally yoked, even in the financial space. So the interest rates vary based on your debt to income, your credit score, and all of that. But as we stimulate the economy, I think it's, safe to say it'll probably stay under the fours.
Wow. And will the probability of a recession, like many people are saying, bring housing costs down?
Well, like I said, with the international buyers. So there's low inventory, not just in Charleston, but everywhere. So a lot of places in the U.S. there's low inventory, and that's also due to not just the international buyers, but the iBuyers or the companies that are now buying real estate to rent, because the rental market is also a hot market. So I don't foresee that in the near future that we'll have like the foreclosures and that kind of thing. I think these corporations, major corporations, are in the real estate space who were not initially in the business of selling real estate. Some of them are now brokerages, are now buying or offering more or 10% more than the market value, because they want to attract that live like an apartment, rent like a home clientele.
Mm. And what is the interest rate on a 15-year mortgage?
Well, I've seen 2.75. Again, that's a mortgage lender question. Us real estate professionals, agents, or brokers, we're not really in the lending space to, know to monitor that. That's more of a mortgage lender question. But I've seen them as low as 2.75 and a little under that as well.
Wow. And you said this quote, with Toni Gilliard on your side, your experience will be less stressful. What is that typical experience with you?
Well, it's a rodeo. Not a roller coaster, but a rodeo, meaning I take the stress to allow my clients to be able to raise their children or to run their businesses, meaning this is what you pay me to do. Right. Meaning, I got to handle the photos and the staging and making sure, it's presented in a nice light. I manage or micromanage the showings and the booking so that your phone isn't ringing off the hook every time a client wants to see your property. And I think a lot of the apps that we have in the profession, such as Showing Time, allow us to do that with ease. Where we send text message automations when appointments are requested for showings, and then just navigating the transaction once it's ratified, because that at that point the clock starts, where it's like the finish line. We got 20 or 30 days, maybe 45, to get you to the finish line to be able to close that transaction.
Wow. And you also said this too, quote, it's my goal to take a seemingly complex process and make it understandable and profitable as well. How understandable and profitable will that be in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I always think from either the next day or 5 or 10 years being transparent. So with all my listings, I provide a seller a net sheet, and I find out what they owe and what we're pricing it at and all the things that go, factor into that cost, so that they know that they're operating in a profit space. Because sometimes I've had to turn away clients where it didn't make business sense to sell that property. They would have to come to the table with money. And at that point, I just say, okay, as much as I would like your business, it's easier for you to apply for a modification with your lender and stay in your home, because you're operating in the negative. And then where are you going to go, once we sell your house, right? Because you have no capital. So I think being fully transparent, like I said, is always key. And sometimes that doesn't mean that the agent is going to benefit, but you will have a forever client because you are serving as a resource to the community and the general public.
And how do you benefit, Ms. Toni?
I benefit because I am doing God's work. I am serving. I am coming from a space of service, and sometimes that doesn't mean it's going to benefit me. And I'm quite okay with that, because that means the blessing is on the front end. So that is how I benefit, by doing the work that I've been assigned to do, and all will be well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Ms. Toni Gilliard, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure being here today.
Likewise.